I would like to introduce you all to Adam Quinney, who is going to talk to you about the Ontological model for leadership and life. And Adam is an executive leadership coach, and he specializes working with the smartest people in the room. That's not an organization, that's literally the smartest people in the room. You know, all those people with those massive big brains, and hopefully some of them might have some big hearts as well. So he's a former software developer and attorney, and he's learned the hard way about the costs that come from keeping your heart safe and chasing after external rewards to feel whole and complete. I think there's quite a few of us in the room who can relate to that. So from love, Adam is connection, passion, presence, wit, and brilliance. And from fear, he is awkward, robotic, apathetic, irrelevant, and arrogant. Those are all his words, not mine, just to be clear. He's learned to embrace all these parts of himself, and he works with others to do the same in their own lives. He lives with his beautiful wife, who's here today as well, and their dog in Victoria. So they've come over especially to share the experience with us. He's a man on a mission to bring the world to a more inspired and fully expressed place. So I'd like you to give all a big round of applause for Adam. Thank you very much. Green button when you want to move forward.
And is red back?
Yes.
Okay, right on. Oh, and there's a big screen there. Let's. Can I adjust this mic?
Yes.
Okay. How's that sound? Is it good? Nice. Okay. Y'all stoked about coaching? Hopefully we can up that a little bit by the end of this talk. I like to move around, but I've got this big block of wood in front of me, so maybe I can get this up a little higher. Maybe I can stand over here. I do. Can I do that? Oh, that's way better. That's cool. Okay, and then I've got this. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for having me. I'm from Victoria, British Columbia, born and raised. For anyone else that, represent. Thank you, Robin, for the acknowledgement of the land, and I just want to acknowledge the beauty of the land that we get to be on. It's just so incredible, and I find in the sort of path that I walk and that all of us are walking, where we're really committed to living life on the edge of our experience and to really feel everything that's there. There's days that are amazing, and there's days that suck. And throughout all those days, what I'm always present to is the beauty of the land, the medicine of just the ocean and the mountains and everything we get to be here with. So, hell yeah. Okay. That sounds complicated. Hope this presentation's good. Let's find out. I'm going to tell jokes. I'm going to laugh at them. It's better if you do as well. So it's just a heads up how this will go. So this is our agenda. I want to talk about the aims for today in this presentation, a little bit about my background. That's probably the least interesting thing. I'll talk about this fancy sounding word called ontology, talk about how you became the way you are, the impact of how you became the way you are, how to use this to transform, and then we'll shift to questions. One of the things you're going to discover about the questions section is that you guys have to generate that, and MCC coaches are really good at sitting in awkward silence. So that's how that'll go. Generate questions for me, please. 1 sec, I want to take my watch off here too so that I've got a time. Okay, perfect. Okay, so what are we trying to do here today? Ultimately, what I want to leave us with is creating a shift in the way that you relate to humans and yourself, which is kind of the essence of all coaching, right? And hopefully through this conversation, we'll call it, we'll create that here too. We want to open up some new opportunities in terms of how you relate with yourself, your life, your clients, your coworkers, and those you lead. And I hold that coaches lead and leaders coach. We want to create new options in our approach, your thinking that was previously hidden from your awareness. In this moment, I'm just reminded of people saying PowerPoint presentations are bad because people just read the bullets. So I apologize, I'm doing that, I'm catching myself. And what I like to do is think about cholera, just as a general thing in my life. But in this moment, the reason I'm talking about thinking cholera is because I was reading about the cholera epidemic, as one does. And what was happening at this time in England, London, was there was this huge cholera epidemic. And the theory of disease at the time was based on humors, which were like smells, bad smells, which is why you'd have these things called posies, flowers that you could hold in your pocket, you could smell, you could stick them in the those plague doctor masks. You could put smell in that to protect you from the bad humor and thus not get the disease. And as people were trying to solve this epidemic of cholera, they were trying to solve it through the model of humors. And of course, it didn't work because the issue was not bad smells. And this one man had this theory of disease of germ-borne disease theory, and that it was transmitted through the water. Until that model could come into existence, the options for how they resolved, for how they researched, how they looked at cholera was not available. Does that make sense to everyone? So will you all start to think about cholera going forward? So that's what we're trying to do, is create a bit of a different model for how we look at the people that we're working with, that we're supporting, and most importantly, ourselves. Okay, so this is my background very quickly. In one lifetime, I was a software developer and a project manager. I was very, very briefly a lawyer. I practiced for about a year as I was articling. I wrote the bar, and by that time, I was already on my way out to get into this career of coaching. So I'm still a non-practicing member of the BC Bar, and these days I'm an executive coach. I have an MCC from the ICF, and I train and develop coaches and leaders in transformational leadership. Yay me. Okay, let's talk about this fancy Greek-sounding word. So ontology is something I'm deeply passionate about. And what this word means is the study and science of being. So we're looking below the layer of what is presenting on the surface to the being underneath. Like we can all look at a rock and be like, that rock is a rock. We know that that rock there is a rock, but what is it that makes the rock a rock? What is this element called rockiness? And we could look deeper and be like, well, it's calcium bicarbonate, and that's one of the minerals that we've attributed to rockiness, but there's this quality of being we could call rock. And the Greeks have been looking at this for years. And so fundamentally, when we're talking about that in the coaching parlance, what we mean is we're looking below the layer of what's presenting on the surface, what people are doing, to the being underneath. So the example I like to use involves a to-do list. And some of you may be able to relate to this or know people like this. Does anyone know those sort of people where they have a list of items on their to-do list and they're frantically trying to cross them off? They're harried, but they know that once they get that done, then things will be better and maybe they can have a rest or feel peace. Anyone, can I just nod your heads, exercise your neck in this moment? Excellent. So on the surface, this makes complete sense. We've got a list of things. That list of things is making us feel stressful, harried. And so what do we try to do? We try to cross it off because once that's done, that list of things will be gone, and then we can feel good. Then we can feel peace. Total sense. At the ontological layer, what we are seeing is someone who is being stressed out and harried in the hopes that it'll lead to them being peaceful. And once we start to see it at that level, it's nonsensical. It makes sense, we understand why they're doing it, but it's not gonna work. At best, the game that they're playing is be stressed out, be harried, and then I can have a moment of peace, and then rinse, repeat. Does that make sense to everyone? Good, because I'm not gonna explain it further. Ontological leadership is simply the being of leader, regardless of our circumstance, regardless of our position in a hierarchy, regardless of the number of years of experience. Who do I need to be in this moment to be a leader? Who do I need to be up here on stage right now to be a leader? Cool? Cool. Oh, I like the call and response. Okay. So we're going to start at the beginning, and what I want to draw out is how we arrive at where we arrive at in life. I think I initially had these bullet points set to come out individually, but that's okay. We're just going to deal with them all there. So in the beginning, we start as light, what I would call our essential nature or our essence. And the easiest way to think of this, I find the easiest way to distinguish this in a human is to think of qualities of being. So all of us have these qualities of being, and all humans have access to all qualities of being, but sort of like the way my hair parts, we have strong suits. So by qualities of being, think of things like brilliance, wisdom, generosity, divinity, courage, leader, humility. Making sense? We can keep listing these. It's inexhaustible. We'll never get to the end of this. And the easiest place to see this is often with toddlers, because those little guys and girls have not learned from the world around them that there is any way to be other than what's innate. Have y'all noticed this? It's really annoying, right? But it's delightful too. And when we spend time around children of this age, we'll find ourselves saying things like, it's really weird, but this little kid seems kind of like a wise old soul. Or, man, this kid really connects deeply with me. Or, damn, this kid is hilarious. Has anyone had that experience? So that's our experience of essence. We are having this pure, unfiltered experience being with this toddler of their essence. So it's much easier for us to pick up on that from toddlers. But all of you have probably had this experience just with other people in your life. This is what makes toddlers so delightful and why it's so annoying that airlines always book them in the seat right behind me. So like I said, we have strong suits, and it doesn't mean that like, oh, if my strong suit is X, Y, or Z, I can't at times be this other thing. It's just, again, like the way my hair parts, it's helpful if I have a sense of how that is, because then I can work with it. Okay, everyone tracking? So next comes fear. And what happens is that we come onto this planet completely actualized. We don't know that there's any reason we should be anything other than who we be innately. And then we get training from the world around us. And I want to say that this training's totally innocent. The training comes in all manner of forms. It comes from our parents being exhausted by a long day, us crying or laughing or trying to explain something to them, and then them having a reaction to that. It comes from the way that the kid on the playground shows up around me when I do whatever I do. It comes from the way my kindergarten teacher does whatever she does whenever I do whatever I do. And the training teaches us there's something about the way that I'm being that is unacceptable. There is something about the way that I'm being in this moment that needs to be different, other than the way I am. And typically, this training takes two forms, because we're not particularly sophisticated and because our fear operates in a very linear sense. So the conclusion we reach is, I'm either too much in this moment or I'm not enough. That track for everyone? There's another point I want to make here, bear with me. Yes. This training is innocent, and whilst as adults and especially as coaches, we can kind of distinguish what's happening, being like, oh, my mom is just stressed out because she's had a long day, and her parents probably told her to be quiet because she's a lot to be with, and so she's just telling that to me. None of that is available to us as children. I wish it was to those toddlers behind me, but it's not. It's simply not available, and so we conclude this is about me, there is something wrong. And so we kind of, you could look at any of these particular qualities of being, and the conclusion we'll reach is, oh, this state of this way I am needs to be addressed. There's something wrong, and I have to fix it. Which moves us, to our compensatory strategies. By the way, none of this is conscious per se. It's not like the child is like, okay, who I am is brilliant, and what's happening is blah, blah, blah. I need to create a strategy. We just kind of do this. We muddle through. So if who we are in the moment is feeling like we're being too much, what we learn to do is turn ourselves down. We turn down the volume on our being. We underexpress what is natural for us. And if who we are being in that moment occurs to us like it's not enough, we overexpress. We turn ourselves up. So for example, let's assume I'm working with the quality of brilliance, and I bring home a test and I got an A- on it. And I wasn't trying to get A's. I don't know that A's are good. I have no context for any of that. I just bring home this test, and it seems like my teacher's proud of me, and I show it to my parents, and my parents say, hey, that's great, Adam, but like, how come an A-? You're super smart, you're really capable, you can really apply yourself, you could get A+. And so I conclude, I guess I'm not smart enough. I guess that I didn't do as well. I guess I need to turn this up. So I go from not being smart enough, I'm not enough, and I start to overexpress myself to compensate. So I create these strategies. Some strategies that some of you may be able to relate with would be like I study voraciously. I learn to read all the time. I learn to always have the answer. I become really good at arguing to prove that I'm right, because if I'm right, that means I'm smart, because that's what we're trained in. Make sense for everyone? Everyone following? Yeah. Let's look at another quality for this other side of things. So this quality, presence, or sometimes I call it radiance, is that quality some people have. It's kind of like star power or a celebrity. They're people that are interesting. They draw our eyes. They take up space. They have a voice, perhaps like mine, that gets heard in a lot of different rooms. And so perhaps I'm just being myself, and the feedback I get from my parents is, hey, stop showing off. And so I conclude, oh, I take up too much space, I must be too much, and around this situation I learn to dim my light, to turn it down. And so I create these strategies. I'll keep myself small, I'll avoid the spotlight, I'll put a lot of attention on everyone other than myself, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Is everyone tracking how we can kind of get to this point? So we could draw these out for any particular quality of being that we might want to look at. And we go from our light to our fear to our strategies.
That's always a place where gender is also getting different messages, right?
Yes, Ant. It's a really great question. I'm glad. What was your name? Marie-France. Marie-France? Enchanté. Merci. Excellent question. So, yes, gender receives this training differently, or maybe more likely to receive this training. For example, women historically have been told to keep small. So what women have done is to underexpress. Guess what men have been taught? Speak up, take up space in the room, be a leader. And so we learn to overexpress. And the thing that's helpful to recognize is both of these are a deviance from our innate self. Mm-hmm. We can elaborate more on this once we get to questions, but I really love the angle of that. Thank you. Okay, so once we start to build these strategies, we start to hone them and have them become a part of how we find our way into our life. Over time, they become honed, perfected, and automatic. Automatic meaning we're not conscious of them. We stop realizing that this is a strategy we put into place. We stop realizing this is something that we're choosing. And as a result of our unconsciousness, we stop choosing them. There's two big consequences to this. The first is that we stop seeing them. I guess I already said that. But what happens is we relate to them as the way we are. So we start to say things like, I'm just the sort of person that it really drives me nuts when people say something and I know they're wrong. I have to say something. I'm just the sort of person that has to take the bait. I'm just the sort of person that prefers to avoid the party and go home and hang out by himself. I'm just the sort of person that ... That makes sense for everyone? So we relate to these as how we are rather than how we've become. Second thing is, because this is how we're unconsciously showing up, we find ourselves into relationships and careers that are a natural fit for these strategies. And this reinforces this. The more I'm in an environment that's a fit for how I've learned to become, the more that gives me an external piece of evidence that this isn't the way I've become, this is the way I'm supposed to be. I would be different if not for. So for example, this guy learned growing up, part of who I am, you heard in the intro that I had nothing to do with writing, that I'm brilliant. And so that story about getting those grades, that was a big part of growing up for me. And I learned, oh, it's really important I apply myself and I need to study. And even though I think I'm getting good grades, I could do even better. So I became very afraid of possibly feeling or looking stupid. And I created these really good strategies to ensure that I didn't have to be with that feeling or experience. So I learned to study voraciously, to argue that I was right all the time, to have the right answer, backed by the right answer, backed by a third extra secret right answer. And that was a complete perfect fit for law. And then once I get into the practice of law, I'm surrounded by people that are doing the same thing. And then if you said, well, Adam, you don't actually have to be that way, I'd look around and be like, are you crazy? The evidence is all around. This isn't self-created. This is my world. This is the way the world is. Can everyone see how that stops being something we have the ability to notice as our own, and it starts to become projected and reflected by the world external to ourselves? Cool. Can someone just go like, or like, whoa? Okay, that's good, thanks. Yeah, excellent. Get some, is that Abed? It's either Abed or Andy Samberg in the house. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Here's the end result. This is where we end up. So first of all, our options diminish because our automatic behaviors don't allow for them. So I'm not going to look for situations or even consider stepping into situations that would sort of require me just stating opinions and letting people state their opinions and not having any of us have any discussion around it. It's just not even available to me. So the world starts to shrink by virtue of who I've learned that I am, who I start to conclude is the way I am. The second thing that happens is we attempt to achieve what we want in life through what we are doing. And that's going to fail because of the underlying way of being, which is a bit confusing. So let me see if I can explain that. I had a story that I was awkward and robotic and hard for people to be around. And what I would do because of that, I'd get afraid that I felt that people felt uncomfortable around me. And so I'd do two things. I would avoid people and I would try to put more conversation into the moment. So if you talk to me, it was just like nonstop conversation, joke, conversation, interesting tidbit of conversation, blah, 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 blah. There was no room for you to speak, and then I'd end the conversation and I'd leave. And what I'm gonna try to do from this place is I'm gonna figure out, like, I want more friends. How do I do that? And then I'm gonna start going to networking events, and I'm gonna start to going to like soccer clubs or badminton meetups, and I'm gonna run the exact same way of being. I'm trying to solve something that's fundamentally internal through changing what lies externally. That track for everyone? So it's not gonna work. And finally, where we end up is resigned. We conclude this is just the way I am. We say things like, this is just the sort of thing that's not gonna be available to me. Or I need to learn to be okay with not having that. And this is where all of our clients will often get to, is that they're sort of like, I just have to learn how to be happy with what I have, which is beautiful. If it's really a recognition of the fact that like joy is available in each and every moment, but if it's being stated as sort of a giving up on what's possible for ourselves, then it's kind of sad. So this is where we end up. The end. Total bummer presentation. Good luck. Let me know if you have a solution. Okay, so here's what we can do. First of all, if we can just distinguish this pattern, if we can start to see this at play, we start to see more layers of, maybe we could call it complexity, or how things get put together with our people. And we can start to see more of the depth of the people that we're working with. But there's more. Like instead of steak knives, we can do more. So one, we can transform the way we experience ourselves at work, life, and so on. This one is really important. So a lot of our experiences and our clients' experiences of feeling drained, burnt out, tired, exhausted are a function of these strategies at play. We believe it's a function of the circumstances, people, and situations we find ourselves in. I just don't like being around those kind of people. I find them exhausting to be with. I just don't like being around that kind of job or that kind of circumstance because I find it exhausting. Here's what I assert. No, I'm not going to assert anything yet. That's coming. I'm going to tell you a story. Imagine we had a child whose parents told this child, there's certain people in the world around which they really want you to walk on all fours. And it's actually quite polite to do so. So when you're around these people, to get ahead in life, you need to get down and you need to walk on your hands and your knees. And so this child loves his parents, and he doesn't really question it too much, and he starts to do that. And as he does that, it starts to become something he doesn't think about it so much. It starts to sink into his unconsciousness. At first, people think it's kind of weird, but then they just kind of get over it because the person's very self-effacing and charming. And what happens is this child now becomes a man. And every time this child, or now man, goes and spends time with these people, he comes back and he's like, God damn it, my knees are sore, my back hurts, I feel kind of sheepish and embarrassed. My stomach starts to hurt before I even think about going out there. I just think that those are the sort of people I don't like to be around. Now, this is a ridiculous example, but it serves to illustrate this point. Because what's happening is this child is spending time holding himself in a position that is unnatural for himself. And that's what we're doing when we're running these strategies. We are holding ourselves energetically in a position that is unnatural for ourselves. And that requires an exertion of energy. Does that track? Cool. You guys are either like really zeroed in or zeroed out. I'm gonna hold it, the first one. Yeah, the first one is how I'm gonna hold that. By the way, is that where my Zoom people are? Right there? Can anyone? Over here. Okay, great. Excellent. Okay, so what we can do, and I've got practices for all of this, both for you and for your clients, and you don't have to worry if I change the slide beforehand. On the questions slide, I've got them all written out as well. So just so you know that they'll come back. So we can practice some things, one specifically for ourselves and to support our clients with this. We can notice the situations that we find draining, tiring, et cetera, et cetera. We can take an audit. Who are the people? What are the circumstances? What are the places where I just feel tired, exhausted, don't want to be there? And we can get curious about who and how we are being in those situations. How have I learned to show up? What might be automatic for me? And it's really worth knowing that the way you are being in those moments will always be internally justified. Meaning, if you were to ask me, like, who are you being around, like, law firm partners? I'm going to be like, well, I'm talking smart and using highfalutin words, but that's because they're using them. And if I didn't do that, then it would, and there's going to be a justification there. So this getting on all fours, so to speak, so is justified. Don't let that stop you. Get curious about this one. Who am I being? How am I being? And second, we can ask ourselves, what's this costing me? What's unavailable to me in this moment by virtue of the way I'm being? And that starts to open up the door to what might be possible beyond these strategies. Oh, so much text. Let's talk about how this shows up in relationships. So a couple things happen in relationship. One, you're going to be drawn to people with a similar essence to you. So if you're someone with a strong suit in, say, generosity, you're naturally going to be drawn to someone else with that same beautiful quality. If you're someone with a lot of brilliance, you're going to see and admire that brilliance in other people. Simultaneously, you're often going to be drawn to someone with the reciprocal to your strategy, your survival mechanism. So if I'm someone with presence and I learned that the way for me to be in certain situations is to take up all the space in the room, I'm going to find someone else's tendency to keep themselves super small very attractive, because I'm going to say, wow, look at her. She doesn't need to take up all the space. It's exhausting for me when I'm on stage. I'm running the show. I'm trying to be a one-man show to everyone. She's comfortable just sitting there. That's so admirable. So at first, that's a really beautiful thing. And this is especially made possible because we're chemically aided at the start of relationships. We're in that infatuation stage where our biology is really helping us. As time goes on, our armor comes back up, our judgments return, and what we once loved, we start to judge. And we conclude the problem is the other person is fill in the blank, whatever label we want to attach to this part of ourselves and them that we judge. So we might conclude this person over there is a narcissist, or this person's a mouse and is unwilling to take up space, or whatever it happens to be. For those of you that are curious, maybe this sounds familiar, this is also basically what the Imago model of relationship talks about. And if you want to read a book about that, Getting the Love You Want by Harville Hendricks is an excellent book. Really fascinating area of study into relationships. The thing I find beautiful about this is that often people conclude, oh, I found the wrong person, but often we found the perfect person. They have the medicine to heal us, but also the poison to further wound us. And it really depends just how we relate to it. Here's some ways you can practice with this. So we can notice the times when we're triggered by how our partner shows up. Really conscious that my wife is in the room right now. We can ask ourselves, how are they being that is annoying me? This is the gimme. How are they being? How are they being that is annoying me? But then, how and where do I do the reciprocal? Or the same thing. And this last part's super important. Not do I do the reciprocal, how do I? Do I do the reciprocal is a closed-ended question. Bad coach. Because we have a vested interest in not seeing this. So if we ask ourselves, do I do this? We're going to come up with a bunch of justification to help us see our way out. Nah, I don't think so. Maybe in those areas. But how do I do this opens it up. It has us really bring curiosity. And what we can do is we can get present to the underlying light that's reflected by these two reciprocals. Oh, this person takes all the space up in the room. This person hides from taking up any space in the room. Maybe there's some presence, some radiance at play here. I'll speak to a resource at the end of this to support you with this, if that sounds a little murky. I apologize. I really should have put some like fun animations in or something. I'm just putting myself in your guys' shoes and just like, damn, this guy gives a wall of text to look at. Okay, so the third thing we can do is we can transform our leadership. As opposed to management, leadership is about supporting people to step beyond the point at which they get confronted into the unknown, just like coaching. And this is inevitably going to drive up those compensatory strategies to keep themselves safe, those mechanisms that they have to stop themselves from having to continue to feel confronted. That part makes sense to everyone? What happens is that we relate to people as their strategies rather than the underlying light underneath that is then generating that strategy. And I think this example will help make that clear. So imagine someone who is the being of commitment. And if you know someone like this, they're the sort of person you already know, like you bring them onto the ICF board, that board already has more commitment behind it. The projects are more likely to stay the course. The projects are more likely to like move forward, to have someone pushing things forward. Does anyone know someone like that in your life in your relationships? No one, okay. Sucks for the board. No hands went up. But imagine someone like that. So when this person gets confronted, consider that one of the things they may do is fear like, I'm not enough commitment. What I need to do is turn up the commitment. I'm going to commit to more things. And when someone starts to commit to more things and overcommit, what happens? It's good. I'm just sort of putting energy this way, letting them have their process. They start to drop balls because they're overcommitted. And then what we do is we relate to them as flaky. Or there might be an extra step here. They start to drop balls, and then they decide, I'm not going to commit to anything. I'm going to stop committing. I'm going to give vague answers when people say, when can you have this done by? And either way, what happens is we end up relating to them as their strategies. Who Joyce is someone who is flaky. I need to coach flakiness out of this person. And so we try to correct that flakiness by having them try to commit more, by micromanage them, by checking in on them every day to see where are those commitments you've said. And how do you think that makes Joyce feel? Afraid, right? Less present to her greatness. And what that does is it repeats the cycle. From fear, double down further on commitment, and so on and so forth. Instead, what we can do is we can relate to them as someone who is commitment and is simply afraid. Oh, the person I'm dealing with is not flaky. There's someone who is the being of commitment, and they're afraid, and from their fear, what they've learned to do is show up as flaky. There is something at play here that keeps them safe. And from that place, we can connect to them as the underlying light and begin to bring them up from that place. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes.
Can I hurl an idea?
Hurl it.
Okay.
Hurl it.
So someone who is commitment, or often it can look like devotion.
Should we get a mic for the Zoom people?
I'm really loud. Am I loud enough?
Well, no, the Zoom people.
Oh.
Because I'm sure it's a great thing to share.
I'd say throw it, but I can't catch. Is this on? Okay. So if someone is commitment, another way that can look is devotion. So is anybody here present to someone in their life who is devotion? Yeah, okay. Or maybe it's you. And so for commitment and devotion, that person is a yes, and they're an ultimate yes. So if they're going to do it, they're going to do it, and they'll do it all the way to the end. And if they've done that enough times, they're going to be burnt out and afraid, and they will stop saying yes. And even though they are commitment, they will stop. They'll occur either unreliable or just resistant, like they have no commitment at all. They have a commitment issue, and it's usually actually the opposite.
Thank you, Bae. So here are some practices we can have. When you notice someone is triggered, a client, someone that's a direct report, someone you're supporting, the first thing we can do is we can get clear on who they are underneath. What is this light underneath? And from there, we can acknowledge them for that. Imagine how different 360s, corporate evaluations, or even just feedback would be if the first thing that happened is that someone saw the underlying light of who someone is, especially in the face of the way that person is showing up, looking kind of opposite, especially when that person's having a really hard time seeing themselves that way. That would be a radical shift. So we can acknowledge them for who they truly are, and then people could ask about the incongruence. Ron, I noticed that who you are is someone who's commitment. I put you on any team, and that team shows up more powerfully, moves towards their goal much faster, much better, with much more dedication. But I notice in this situation, there's a bit of an incongruence with that. What's going on? Much more powerful place to check with people.
Adam,
Yes.
can I ask you a question?
Yes, where are you?
I'm here in the pink.
Yes, hello.
Is it fair to say we're all the same?
In what manner of speaking?
Well, when you break down the rock and break it down and break it down and break it down and break it down and break it down, aren't we all the same? Like that light, isn't that light like either fear or love? And aren't we all just love?
Mm-hmm. Does your hair part the same way mine does?
It looks like it does.
As everyone else in the room?
No.
Right. And yet, you're also right. So on one level, we're all the same. We're all stardust. Simultaneous to that, we could say, like, at one level, molecularly, we're like 90% space.
Yeah.
But when I bring my knuckles against this piece of wood, they stop. So at some level, yes, we're all the same. But then as we start to move up through these layers, we have differences.
Right. So maybe it's that expression is different. The expression is different, but the essence is the same. So I am the same thing as that, knock, knock, knock. I'm the same thing as that wood, right? It's expressing itself as wood, and I'm expressing it as this. But aren't at the essence, isn't we all not the same?
Well, let me ask this. What's important about the distinction you're drawing?
What is important about the distinction that I'm drawing? I don't know.
Okay. So that might be a good thing to just sit with.
Yeah.
But here's what I can offer. There's millions of different models that we can bring to the table. What I find potent about any particular model is not that it's right. Not that it speaks to the absolute, objective, arbitrary truth of what is and is not.
Right.
But that it gives us access to more choice in our lives. And what I find with this model is it can really provide us access to a lot more choice.
Oh yeah, I'm not disagreeing or being contrary or disagreeing with you. I'm just offering something else. Yeah,
Yes.
that's it.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. I see some hands. I think the next slide says questions, so let me advance to the next slide to just make sure. Right on time. So let me finish this and then we'll open the floor. These are the summary of practices. I tried to get the font smaller, but I wasn't able. So apologies for that. These are all the practices that we've laid out. There's a couple of resources here. You can go to my website if you're curious about an ontological model or approach. I've got a podcast. I write a lot about this, so you can go there. And then finally, I've got a book on this. There's a bunch of copies I brought. I don't know how many are left on the back table. Help yourself. And if we're all out, you can come talk to me, and I'll just send you a free PDF digital copy of it. So in that book, what I do very briefly is break out 25 qualities, show you how we can go from the essence to the survival mechanism strategies. What are some common pitfalls for these particular qualities of being? How do you work with these people in this way? That is not an exhaustive list. This is like being a sommelier for wine. We could say this wine tastes like straw and that one tastes like leather. It's not the objective arbitrary truth, but it's a way that we can start to distinguish our wine and learn how to work with it and what do we pair that wine with and so on and so forth. Okay. I'm now going to tentatively open the floor for questions. Yes. Hello.
Hi. So this question.
Can I have your name first?
This question is from Monica on Zoom. I'm Louise.
Excellent.
Okay. So I'm on behalf of Monica. How would you know what the person's light is if all you see are their strategies?
How would you know a person's light if all you see is their strategies? So what we want to do, can someone give me a strategy so that we can work with it, so that we're not just in the theoretical? Shout. What's that? Great. Okay, so what we want to do is learn to start to look, first of all, we want to consider there's a light behind every strategy. And we want to ask ourselves, what kind of way of being, what kind of beautiful light, when it's afraid, might play really small? Someone shout out a guess. Speak up. Presence, great. Anyone else have anyone? High energy, yeah. Maybe joy. Generosity. Beautiful. So again, this is not like a what's the right thing. This is sort of like learning how to trace a path back to start to see some of the light underneath. So that's the way we start to do that too. Was it Monica? Yes. Louise?
Yes, it was Monica.
Yeah, that's how we start to work with that, is we start to ask ourselves that and really be in the inquiry of what's the kind of light that might show up this way when it's afraid. Great question.
So we have a follow-up here, another question from our online Zoom from Shelley Ann. How does one begin to know and live into their essence?
So the metaphor I like for our essence is borrowed from a man called Tim Kelly, I believe, from a book he wrote called True Purpose. And he describes our essence like a beautiful colored light bulb that hovers right behind our head from the moment we were born till the moment we die. Mine's kind of this sweet blue color. And when I come into a room, everyone gets this experience like, oh, the room just kind of got like that nice blue color. And when I leave the room, everyone goes, oh, the room got a little less blue. You all get that experience because you can be in the room and witness me enter and witness me leave. But for each of us, we can't do that because from the moment we were born, we are experiencing the world through the color of our light bulb. So that's the first thing. It can be really helpful to recognize, oh, it's tough for me to see it myself. So I want to give you all a simple practice to start to work with this. Once we go to break, find someone and ask them, can you give me 30 seconds? And then say, what qualities do I bring into the room? What shows up when I do? I'm going to say that one more time. What qualities do I bring into the room? What shows up when I do? And if you're the person being asked this, your job is just to give an answer from your gut. Not your head, just your gut. So someone please shout out a quality that shows up when I come into the room. And don't leave me hanging here. Someone shout it out.
Courage.
Yes, one more.
Humor.
Strength. Oh, this feels amazing. One more.
Humor.
Humor, amusement, great. Thank you. Thank you for seeing me. We can all see this in other people. The trouble is our head gets all up in it and tells us, no, you're not saying the right thing, blah, 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 blah. So to Shelley's question, thank you, Shelley, that's the way we can start to work with this, is ask people that question and then practice trusting the answer you get back. Thanks, Louise. Other questions? Yes.
Well, it's not a question. This is a comment from Dale, but I think it's quite a nice comment for all of us. Each person is unique, and it is up to us to evoke it in them. And there lies the magic, because it is they that defines it, not us. Trust it is there and unique to them.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Dale. Bay.
It's sort of a question. Can I do it?
I'm not going to say no to you. Last question, yes.
Okay, the beautiful radiant woman in the pink shirt. What is your name? Tara. Adam's really good with names, and I'm terrible. I loved your question, and it's a question that we get asked a lot, right? Like, but we're a rock, and it's a rock in a rock. So a way to think of that is they're all rocks, but some are quartz, and some are like chrysocolla, and some are granite. So they're all rocks, but they each have a quality that makes them different. And the way to make this human is, if you are a parent, please raise your hand. First of all, amazing. You made people. Incredible. Secondly, how many of you parents have more than one child? You are heroes. Okay. You had your first child, and at some point later you had your second, briefly thought, what have I done? But as you held that second baby in your arms, was it the same as the first baby?
No.
How long did it take you to figure this out? Seconds. So that's they're babies. They haven't been here long enough to be different, and yet we know they are. And so you can't really break this down and define it. It's a thing that you just know. Does that kind of help? Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you, Bay. So thank you, everyone. Please come say hi at some point today. Help yourself to a book if there's one there. And if there's none left, just let me know. Let me know, then I'll happily send you a digital copy. Thank you so much.